When you think that you lost, oh, I will take your hand and we'll rise up from the dust. Oh, here we go, 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 let us heal and grow. You won't be alone, we're unstoppable. Don't be afraid to show what we're going for. This is what we know. Here we come back to life, we're still breathing. Standing up, everybody's gonna see it. Oh, all you need to know is that we're holding on. Even if we fall, we will rise up and we follow the path that we believe in. No, we're not gonna stop until we reach it. Oh, all you need to know is that we're holding on. We rise up from the dust and clean my throat. We all have our reasons why we are on this track. Oh, we all have our burdens, yeah, but we just keep on fighting and we never look back. Here we go, 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 let us heal and grow. You won't be alone, we're unstoppable. Don't be afraid to show what we're going for. This is what we know. Here we come back to life, we're still breathing. Standing up, everybody's gonna see it. Oh, all you need to know is that we're holding on. Even if we fall, we will rise up and we follow the path that we believe in. No, we're not gonna stop until we reach it.
How about now? There we go. Sorry about that. I didn't notice I didn't have any audio. So at least we're not all the way through the chapter here. So I'll start over. Sorry about that. Get a couple minutes of just watching me flap my gums. But all right. So we're on the third. We're on the third article in this book called The Blog Con: How Publishers Make on Money Online, and it starts with two quotes. Media companies can very much be in a race against time for growth. Investors want a return on their money, and given the economics of web news, that almost always requires exponential growth in uniques and page views. That's by Ryan McCarthy from Reuters. Then, Picture a Galley Rowed by Slaves and Commanded by Pirates by Tim Rutten, Los Angeles Times, on the Huffington Post business model. Okay. Thankfully, I was only two paragraphs in. So, stripped bare, the economics of online news, the way blogging really works, is a shocking thing. I've never needed to blog for my daily bread, to generate page views to pay my rent, but as a press agent, a media buyer, and later a consultant to media companies, I know how this system works. I won't say it is I won't say it is as disturbing as watching slaughterhouse videos or an expose of a sweatshop, but it will turn your stomach to learn how online media outlets like the Huffington Post and even the website of the New York Times make their money and how much money they actually make. This matters because as businesses designed to make money, the way in which they do business is the main filter for how they do the news. Every story they produce must contort itself to fit this mold, whatever the topic or subject. I will show you this by explaining exactly how I have exploited these economics for my own personal gain. You're free to view these lessons as opportunities or as loopholes that must be closed. I see them as both. Traffic is money. On the face of it, blogs make their money from selling advertisements. These advertisements are paid for by the impression, generally a rate per thousand impressions. A site might have several ad units on each page. The publisher's revenue equals the cumulative CPM, cost per thousand, multiplied by the number of page views. Advertisement times traffic equals revenue. An ad buyer like me buys this space by the millions. 10 million impressions on this site, 5 million on another, 50 million through a network. A few blogs produce a portion of their revenue through selling extras, hosting conferences, or affiliate deals, but for the most part, this is the business. Traffic is money. A portion of the advertising on blogs is sold directly by the publisher. A portion is sold by sales reps who work on commission, and the rest is sold by advertising networks that specialize in the remaining inventory, often in a real-time bidding system. Regardless of who sells it or who buys it, what matters is that every ad impression on a site is monetized, if only for fractions of a penny. Each and every page view is money in the pocket of the publisher. Publishers and advertisers can't differentiate between the types of impressions an ad does on a site. A perusing reader is no better than an accidental reader. An article that provides worthwhile advice is no more valuable than one instantly forgotten. So long as the page loads and the ads are seen, both sides are fulfilling their purpose. A click is a click. Knowing this, blogs do everything they can to increase the latter variable in the equation: traffic, page views. It's how you must understand them as a business. Every decision a publisher makes is ruled by one dictum: traffic by any means, which is why we see so much clickbait these days on on YouTube. One of the biggest shocks in the online world was the launch of TMZ. The blog was developed by AOL in 2005, and revenues skyrocketed to nearly 20 million a year almost immediately, paving the way for its now famous television program. This was all accomplished through a handful of major scoops, or at least TMZ's special definitions of scoops. The blog's founder, Harvey Levin, once said in an interview that TMZ is, quote, a serious news operation that has the same rigid standards that any news operation in America has, end quote. This is the same site that once published at 4:07 a.m. the exclusive scoop, a blurry, never-before-seen photo of future President John F. Kennedy on a boat filled with naked women. This exclusive scoop was headlined "The JFK Photo That Could Have Changed History," only it couldn't have altered world events for one simple reason. The man in the photo wasn't JFK. In fact, it turned out to be a spread from a 1967 issue of Playboy. Oops. How we doing here? Oh, okay. It looks like we're about to start an ad in just a few seconds. Um, I'm going to keep going until I see it actually go start. Despite missteps like this, TMZ turned scoop getting into a science. They broke the story of Mel Gibson's anti-Semitic outbursts during his DUI arrest, and then they got video of Michael Richards's racist onstage meltdown, posted the bruised Rihanna police photo, and announced the news of Michael Jackson's death. TMZ originated four of the biggest stories to come from the internet and captured a substantial audience from these enormous surges of traffic. They didn't always use the most reputable or reliable means of getting their scoops, but nevertheless, today, when people think celebrity news, they think of TMZ. They don't think of defamer Gawker's predecessor to TMZ, which was shuttered because it couldn't deliver any scoops, and they didn't like Perez Hilton's silly little drawings anymore either. Okay, still no ad. It sent a very clear message to publishers. Exclusive. Oh, there we are. There, it finally started. So I will pause there. So far, it's an interesting read. I'm not sure how this will change my life, if at all, but I suppose I'll look at the news a bit differently from every source and their sources. Um, but I mean, I'm sure I'll learn a lot more as we go. Okay, back to it. It sent a very clear message to publishers. Exclusives build blogs, scoops equal traffic. The thing is, exclusive scoops are rare and at the very least they require some effort to obtain. So greedy blogs have perfected what is called the pseudo-exclusive. In a private memo to his employees, Nick Denton, founder of the Gawker media blog empire, asked the writers to use this technique because it allows them, quote, to take ownership of a story even if it isn't a strict exclusive, end quote. In other words, pretend they have a scoop. The strategy works well because many readers will see the story in only one place. They have no idea that it was actually broken or originally reported elsewhere. One of Gawker's biggest scoops early on in the race, certainly a TMZ level story, was a collection of Tom Cruise's Scientology videos. It is a good example of a pseudo exclusive, since the work wasn't done by the site who eventually got all the page views from it. Since I witnessed the story unfold behind the scenes, I know that the tapes were actually unearthed by Hollywood journalist Mark Ebner, whose blog I was advising at the time. Ebner called me, very excited with news of a potentially huge scoop, and said that he'd bring over the materials. A few hours later, he gave me some DVDs in an envelope marked confidential, which I watched later that night with a friend. Our stupid reaction? Quote, Tom Cruise being crazy. How is that news? End quote. Gawker had a different reaction. See, Ebner had also shown the clips to his friends at Gawker, who turned around and immediately posted a story featuring the videos before Mark or anyone else had a chance to. I don't know whether Gawker promised Mark they'd give him credit. All I know is that what happened was shitty. Their post went on to do 3.2 million views and bring their site a whole new audience. Mark received nothing because Gawker didn't link back to his site, which would have been the right thing to do. By doing this, Gawker owned a story that was not theirs. Only after that did I begin to understand how blog fortunes were made, off the backs of others. When all it takes is one story to propel a blog from the dredges of the internet to mainstream notoriety, it shouldn't come as a surprise that sites will do anything to get their shot, even if it means manufacturing or stealing scoops and deceiving readers and advertisers in the process. Established press doesn't have this problem. They aren't anxious for name recognition because they already have it. Instead of bending the rules and the truth to get it, their main concern for their business model is to protect their reputations. This is a critical difference. Media was once about protecting a name. On the web, it is about building one. I don't think that's quite true anymore. Um, the mainstream media is a lot about getting the scoop, and they don't care about their reputation anymore. Oh, they play at trying to protect it, but they'll lie through their teeth just as fast as any blogger or whatever, like the Gawker did to his friend. The blog con: names, scoops, and traffic create an exit. I've written about how sites engage in an endless chase for revenue through page views, and that is what they do. However, blogs are not intended to be profitable in independent businesses. The tools they use to build traffic and revenue are part of a larger play. Blogs are built to be sold. Though they make substantial revenues from advertising, the real money is in selling the entire site to a larger company for a multiple of the traffic and earnings, usually to a rich sucker. Weblogs Inc. was sold to AOL for 25 million. The Huffington Post was sold to AOL for 315 million in cash, with its owner Arianna Huffington deliberately eschewing the opportunity to wait and build for an IPO. TechCrunch was also sold to AOL for 30 million. Discovery bought the blog Treehugger for 10 million. Ars Technica was sold to Condé Nast for more than 20 million. Know Your Meme was acquired by Cheeseburger Media for 7 figures. Fox Sports Interactive purchased the sports blog network Yardbarker. I worked on an acquisition like this myself when the Collective, a talent management company I advise, bought Bloody Disgusting, a blog about horror films, with an eye on potentially selling it to someone bigger down the line. The site Viral Nova was purchased for a reported $100 million, and EliteDaily.com sold for $50 million. Hello Giggles, a pop culture blog, was acquired for millions as well. Blogs are built and run with an exit in mind. This is really why they need scoops and acquire marquee bloggers, to build up their names for investors and to show a trend of rapidly increasing traffic. The pressure for this traffic in a short period of time is intense, and desperation, as a media manipulator knows, is the greatest quality you can hope for in a potential victim. Each blog is its own mini Ponzi scheme for which traffic growth is more important than solid financials, brand recognition more important than trust, and scale more important than business sense. Blogs are built so someone else will want them, one stupid buyer cashing out the previous ones, and millions of dollars are exchanged for essentially worthless assets. Anything goes to the den of thieves. Oh, in the den of thieves. It doesn't surprise me at all that shady business deals and conflicts of interest abound in this world. My favorite example, of course, is myself. I am regularly the online ad buyer and the publicist or PR contact for the clients I represent. So the same sites that snarkily cover my companies also depend on me for large 6 or 7 figure checks each year. On the same day a writer for a blog might be emailing me for the information about a rumor they heard, their publisher is calling me on the phone asking if I want to increase the size of my ad buy. Later in this book, I'll write about how difficult it is to set bloggers to correct even blatantly inaccurate stories. This conflict of interest was one of the only effective tools I could use to combat that. Naturally, nobody minded what I was doing because they were too busy lining their own pockets to care. Michael Arrington, the loudmouth founder and former editor-in-chief of TechCrunch, is famous for investing in the startups that his blogs would then cover. Although he no longer runs TechCrunch, he was a partner in two investment funds during his tenure and now manages his own Crunch fund. In other words, even when he is not a direct investor, he has connections or interests in dozens of companies on his beat, and his insider knowledge helps turn profits for the firm. When criticized for these conflicts, he responded by saying that his competitors were simply jealous because he was, I'm not kidding, quote, a lot better than them, end quote. So when Arrington blew the lid off a secret meeting of angel investors in Silicon Valley in 2011, later known as Angelgate, it's hard to say whose interests he was serving, his readers or his own. Or maybe he was upset not because collusion is wrong, but because the group had declined to invite him and, again, not kidding, treated him rudely when he showed up anyway. He ultimately left TechCrunch after a highly publicized fight with the new owners, AOL, who dared to question this conflict of interest. Nick Denton of Gawker is also a prolific investor in his own space, often putting money into companies founded by employees who left his company or were fired. He has stakes in several local blog networks, such as Curbed, that are often linked to or written about on his larger sites. By shuffling users around to two sites, he can charge advertisers twice. Denton also invested in the site CityFile, which he was able to pump up with traffic from his other blogs before acquiring it outright and rolling it back into Gawker. Influence is ultimately the goal of most blogs and blog publishers because that influence can be sold to a larger media company, but as Arrington and Denton show, influence can also be abused for profit through strategic investments, be it in the companies they write about or where they decide to send monetizable traffic. And of course, these are only the conflicts of interest blatant enough to be discovered by the public. Who knows what else goes on behind the curtain? It's also interesting to note that many of these blogs and publishing platforms, which purport to expose corruption and the misdeeds of other businesses, often have their own dark secrets. As one former VentureBeat blogger, Becca Grant, recently confessed on Medium, the job was a relentless, rapid machine that had to be constantly fed. Quote, I wrote an average of 5 posts a day, she said, churning out nearly 1,740 articles over the course of 20 months. That is by all objective standards insane. End quote. Insane is one word, exploitative is probably a better one. I remember seeing an ad a few years ago for a Washington Post blogging gig that required at least 12 posts a day, and this is the same organization tasked with holding other businesses and public figures accountable for labor practices. We're supposed to listen to them as they hold Uber's feet to the fire? Enter the manipulator. Bloggers eager to build names and publishers eager to sell their blogs are like two crooked businessmen colluding to create interest in a bogus investment opportunity, building up buzz and clearing town before anyone gets wise. In this world where the rules and ethics are lax, a third player can exert massive influence. Enter the media manipulator. The assumptions of blogs and their owners present obvious vulnerabilities that people like me exploit. They allow us to control what it is in the media because the media is too busy chasing profits to bother trying to stop us. They are not motivated to care. Their loyalty is not to their audience, but to themselves and their con. While ultimately this is reason to despair, I have found one small solace. Conning the con man is one of life's most satisfying pleasures, and it's not even hard. In the next chapters, I will outline how to do this and how it is being done. I have broken down the manipulation of blogs into 9 effective tactics. Each exposes a pathetic vulnerability in our media system. Each, when wielded properly, levels the playing field and gives you free rein to control the flow of information on the web. And that is the end of that article. That was number 3. So we will get into number 4. I think it's about the same length here. Yeah, it's about the same length. So we'll get right into it. Tactic number 1, the art of the bribe. And we start with a quote again. And that is, the writings by which one can live are not the writings which themselves live, and are never those in which the writer does his best. Those who have to support themselves by their pen must depend on literary drudgery, or at best on writings addressed to the multitude. And that is by John Stuart Mill in his autobiography. Okay, real quick. I got a big old greasy fingerprint or something right in the middle of my one lens. Either that or my eye just went even blurrier. That's better. Okay. There are many ways to give someone a bribe. Very rarely does it mean handing them a stack of bills. The criteria that bloggers' employers use to determine the size of their paychecks, the stuff bloggers are paid for, can be co opted and turned into an indirect bribe. These levers were easy enough for me to find, and properly identified and wielded, they turned out to be as effective as any overt payoff. It begins with how these bloggers are hired. Put aside any notion that applicants are chosen based on skill, integrity, or love of their craft. Ben Parr, editor at large at the popular technology blog Mashable, was once asked what he looked for when he hired writers for his blogs. His answer was one word: quickness. Quote, online journalism is fast paced, he explained. We need people that can get the story out in minutes and can compose the bigger opinion pieces in a couple hours, not a couple of days. End quote. As to any actual experience in journalism, that would be considered only a definite plus, quote unquote. The payment structure of blogging reflects this emphasis on speed over other variables, such as quality, accuracy, or how informative the content might be. Early on, blogs tended to pay their writers a rate per post or a flat rate with a minimum number of posts required per day. Engadget, Slashfood, Autoblog, and other sites run by Weblogs or Weblogs Inc. paid bloggers a reported $500 a month in 2005 for 125 posts, or $4 a post, 4 per day. Gawker paid writers $12 a post as late as 2008, and of course, these rates don't include the other duties bloggers are stuck with, such as editing, responding to emails, and writing comments. Professional blogging is done in the boiler room, and it is brutal. Gawker set the curve for the industry again when they left the pay-per-post model and switched to a page view-based compensation system that gave bonuses to writers based on their monthly traffic figures. These bonuses came on top of a set monthly pay, meaning that bloggers were eligible for payments that could effectively double their salary once they hit their monthly quota. You can imagine what kind of results this led to. I recall a post from a Gawker writer whining about how he didn't know how much money he'd make that month and getting 17,000 views for it. The bonus system was so immediately rewarding for Gawker bloggers that the company tweaked their ratio to de-emphasize the bonus slightly. The system remains, however, and today the company has a big board in its offices that shows the stats for all the writers and their stories. When writers aren't fighting for bonuses, all they have to do is look up to be reminded if you're at the bottom of the board, you might get fired. This is how the standard model for this is now the standard model for blogs. Seeking Alpha, a network of financial writers, arguably worth a lot to its investor type readers, launched a payment platform in 2010 that pays writers based on the traffic their posts generate. The average payment per article turned out to be only $58 for the first 6 months. A writer needs to rack up roughly 100,000 views to make even $1,000. A a tough fight when you're jostling for a share of voice against the 1,000+ writers who publish there each month. The blog The All, AWL, announced it would also start paying its writers using a similar model 2 years after its founding. A dozen or so bloggers split a small pool of revenue generated by advertisements on the site. The more traffic the site does, the larger the pool. It's the same incentive desperately dependent on big hits. But instead of fighting each other for page views, they're all in on the hustle together. Many outlets have also built out what they call contributor programs, which open up previously exclusive outlets to freelance writers who are paid by the view or by how many social media shares their articles get, as an approximation of page views. A story from a Forbes.com contributor, for instance, is written not by a Forbes staffer, but by someone hustling to get as many clicks as possible. I don't necessarily think that contributor programs are all bad. I've helped several major publications build them out. But I do think the public needs to be more informed about the difference between these styles of content. You might think you're reading an article written by a professional journalist when in reality you're reading something written by someone who is paid so little for what they wrote that they can be a target for real bribes from the subject of their story, as has happened at contributor heavy online publications like Forbes.com. Here's an email I just got offering to buy links in articles I contribute to entrepreneur.com, another site with such a program. So, quoting the entire email. Hi, Ryan. I've been following your writing on Entrepreneur for some time now. I hope you don't mind me dropping you a quick email. My name is Gareth. I am a London based digital PR consultant. I work with credible clients, offering them a media mention service on the publications you write for. We work with our clients to create natural, informative content, e.g., blog posts, infographics, that would be of value to your upcoming articles in order to place them with a link back to their site. We can also provide interesting and relevant quotes from the CEO or senior employees at our partner's business to add value to your articles. Please remember, we only offer you links that add value to your articles, and we pay promptly for each link that is placed. Just reply to this email and I'd be happy to discuss the remuneration involved and get you started. Thanks and have a great day, Gareth. End quote, obviously. It's almost as if he thinks the euphemisms will cover up the fact that this is an SEO payola scheme. I'm not in a position where I would ever need to accept an offer like that, but you can see how many bloggers would be, and their editors and publishers would likely never know. To give you a sense of the numbers, Henry Blodgett, the founder of Business Insider, once explained that his writers need to generate 3 times the number of page views required to pay for their own salary and benefits, as well as a share of the overhead, sales, hosting, and Blodgett's cut, to be worth hiring. In other words, an employee making $6,000 a year would need to produce a oh, I'm sorry, I said $60,000 a year, would need to produce upward of 1.8 million page views a month, every month, or they're out. This is no easy task. I'd argue it's getting harder over time as people get better at getting traffic and flood the market with inventory. YouTubers face similarly tough economics. YouTube sells and serves the ads, takes a substantial cut, and passes the rest to the creator. Most of these figures are not public, but a decent account can hope to make about $1 for every 1,000 views, less than 1 penny per click. I remember working with the very popular multi platinum rock band Linkin Park and realizing their account, which had done over 100 million views at that time, would earn them barely six figures, to be split among six guys, a manager, a lawyer, and a record label. These kinds of rates force channels, big and small, to churn out videos constantly to make money, for every view is only a penny in their pocket. Social media influencers are straight up mercenary. Through various ad networks, you can actually pay influential accounts to post pre written messages or endorse products. In order to promote one of Tucker's books, I got a Twitter account with more than 400,000 followers to say, quote, fact, people will do anything for money, end quote, for $25. For a few $100s more, I tricked dozens of other accounts into posting humiliating promotional messages that pushed the book to a number 2 debut on the New York Times bestseller list. One blog headline summed it all up. Quote, Tucker Max proves you can pay celebrities to tweet whatever you want, end quote. It occurs to me now that sponsored tweets and Instagram posts and Snapchat stories would be a very easy way to propagate conspiracy theories or fringe ideas. Is there any easier way to legitimize an idea than to have it repeated? And here celebrities are willing to do that at a couple dollars a pop. If all these numbers sound small, and they do to me, it isn't simply because bloggers are getting shafted, it's because what they produce isn't worth all that much. Political analyst Nate Silver once estimated that the median user contributed article on the Huffington Post was worth only $3 in revenue to the company. So even if they were paid fairly for their contributions, it wouldn't be much of a paycheck. Silver looked at high profile articles by former U.S. Secretary of Labor Robert Reich that did 547 comments and 27,000 page views and concluded that they'd be worth only about $200, an amount for which a man like that usually wouldn't get out of bed. Most articles from the currently unpaid contributors generate significantly less revenue than that. I think, yeah, ripe for exploitation. All this means that if bloggers were to get rich or even cover their rent, they've got to find other ways to get paid. That's where people like me come in with boatloads of free stuff. One of the quickest ways to get coverage for a product online is to give it away for free to bloggers. They'll rarely disclose their conflict of interest. And American Apparel At American Apparel, I had two full time employees whose job was to research fashion bloggers, girls who post photos of their outfits each day to thousands of readers who imitate them, and send them our newest garments. I would offer an affiliate ad deal to the most popular girls that would pay them a commission each time someone bought something from our site after seeing their photos. I'm sure you're shocked to read how often their posts featured something from American Apparel. When I promoted movies, tours of the set or invitations to the premiere worked wonders in getting blog coverage. When I worked with bands, concert tickets, or even just an email from the artist could make most bloggers starstruck enough to give me what I needed. And that's nothing compared to what Samsung did. As an advertiser, on Business Insider, Samsung paid for a Business Insider staffer to go to Barcelona to cover the Mobile World Congress. Thankfully, the writer disclosed this relationship, but in that very disclosure, he copped to feeling, quote, pretty warm and fuzzy about Samsung, end quote, as a result of the generous offer. For marketers, it's all about encouraging those feelings however possible. But this is just free swag and perks. The easiest way for bloggers to make real money is to transition to a job with an old media company or a tech company. They can build a name and sell it to a sucker just like their owners and investors are trying to do. Once a blogger builds a personal brand through scoops or controversy or major stories, they can expect a cushy job at a magazine or startup desperate for the credibility and buzz that these attributes offer. These lagging companies can then tell shareholders, quote, see, we're current, or we're turning around things around, end quote. This revolving door has a peculiar influence on coverage, as is to be expected. What blogger is going to do real reporting on companies like Google, Facebook, or Twitter when there is the potential for a lucrative job down the road? What writer is going to burn a source if they view their job as a network play? For my part, I've lost track of the bloggers whose names I have helped make by giving them big stories, favorable and to my liking, and watched transition into bigger gigs at magazines, newspapers, and editorships at major blogs. In fact, the other day I was driving in Los Angeles and noticed a billboard on Cienega Boulevard with nothing but a large face on it, the face of a video blogger who I started giving free clothes to back when his videos did a few thousand views apiece. Now his videos do millions of views, and he has a show on HBO. If you invest early in a blogger, you can buy your influence very cheaply. In most cases, they know what I'm doing and don't care. If blog publishers were constantly looking for an exit, then their bloggers are too. They both want money from the same big media companies. They don't care if the scandals they write about are real or made up, or if their sources are biased or self serving, as long as the blogger gets something out of it. The real conflict of interest. We take it as self evident that journalists shouldn't be paid off by people they write about or have financial investments like owning a stock they're reporting on in their field. The conflict would shape the coverage and corrupt their writing. So for a second, I was pleasantly surprised to read pretty much that exact sentiment in a post by former Gawker writer Hamilton Nolan titled New Rules for Media Ethics. He said it plainly, quote, media people, reporter, commentator, or otherwise, shouldn't have a financial stake in what they're reporting on, end quote. But when I realized how hypocritical it all was, since Nolan is being paid by how many views his posts do, his financial interest isn't in what he writes about, but in how he writes. In the pay-per-page view model, every post is a conflict of interest. Take this Vice piece. Quote, why Texas can't seem to fall in love with In-N-Out Burger, end quote, which from the headline is making a sweeping, seemingly verifiable claim that Texans are rejecting the West Coast burger chain. But upon reading the article, you find that the actual evidence for such a claim is that the In-N-Out locations in Texas have a sub 4-star rating on Yelp. Seriously, that's it. The reporter is exaggerating a claim with little validity because that's where the traffic is. He doesn't care about In-N-Out's stock price. He cares about his own stock in that story. And later, when a financial reporter sees a potential angle in reporting on the decline of the once great private company, he can say, quote, last year Vice reported that, end quote, and on and on and on. I've never had to buy influence directly, but you can see how craven writers like that are easily corruptible. It's not a far walk from flimsy story to fake story. To their credit, most sites explicitly forbid the kind of payola as best they can. Others allow it. Medium.com, a platform I love, is really a site made up of many different channels. Those channels are allowed to sell access and articles to willing buyers. I know this because after getting one of these offers, I emailed the editor at Medium to report the corruption and was told such deals are considered above board. Quote, there's no difference, end quote. Philosopher and provocateur Nassim Taleb said, quote, between a journalist at The Guardian and the restaurant owner in Milan who, when you ask for a taxi, calls his cousin who does a tour of the city to inflate the meter before showing up, or the doctor who willfully misdiagnoses you to sell you a drug in which he has a vested interest, end quote. Most corruption is not obvious. The incentive for bloggers to write bigger, to write simpler, to write more controversially, or conversely, more favorably, to not waste time on or resources on research or fact checking, to write more often than is warranted because it will get them the traffic they need, is hard to spot, but it is there, and it is warping what you see and hear, and what is written about you and your friends when they find themselves in the spotlight. Writing online is often called a digital sweatshop for good reason. Ceaseless fight for table scraps might be another phrase for it. Or in the immortal words of Henry Kissinger, the reason the knives are so sharp online is because the pie is so small. And that is the end of that fourth article. So, we get into tactic number 2 in the next one. In the next reading, that is. I am going to call it there and see who's on. Mr. Blitzer and Vesper were both on earlier. Let's see. Oh, Glock 316 is playing Bioshock 2. I have not gone over to Glock 316 in a very, very long time. So I am going to raid him. So if you'll hang out for just a minute or two and give him a moment of your time, we'll head on over there, and I'll see you there.
Feeling shattered skies, watching teary blue eyes, wonder where I might find some peace of mind. Not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love relations. Now disassembling my own heart, 'cause my mind's a million places and giving up. So it's in my head. Just tell me it's not happening. Tell me it's not happening. Surrender myself. I feel the world collapsing, but it's not lights like I've had, but more sophisticated into love.